All right, let's jump right into this explainer and test out your innate linguistic detective skills. You know that feeling when you're reading an article or maybe just listening to a friend tell a story and you suddenly get this nagging sense that they missed a step or their train of thought just derailed completely? You can't quite put your finger on it, but you just know something is off, right? Well, we do this all the time, totally instinctively. Today, we're diving into the brilliant work of Michael Hoey and his book On the Surface of Discourse to unpack the invisible architecture behind how we communicate. So, we all instinctively know when a conversation goes off the rails. But how exactly do we know? Are we just guessing, or is there some hardwired structural blueprint in our minds? The truth is, whenever we speak, listen, read, or write, we're operating this incredibly complex machine, and most of us don't even know how the gears actually turn. To see if this is really true, let's look at a fascinating experiment that put everyday people's innate discourse skills to the ultimate test. Picture this. It's 1970, and linguist Dr. Eugene Winter decides to run a little experiment. He takes a perfectly logical 10-sentence paragraph about icy roads and the different ways countries handle tire spikes, and he completely scrambles the sentences, just totally out of order. Then, he hands this chaotic mass of text to first-year university students studying computer science, chemistry, and engineering. Think about that for a second. These students had absolutely zero background in linguistics. Facing a paragraph that should have read like literal gibberish, he gave them just 20 minutes to put it back together. Mind-blowing, right? 55% of these students reconstructed the text perfectly or with only the tiniest of errors before time ran out. With zero formal training in discourse analysis, they intuitively snapped the pieces back into their correct logical order. This essentially proved that native speakers share an unconscious consensus about discourse organization. It's like a giant puzzle, and we just know how it fits together even if we can't fully explain why. Section 1. The secret rules of discourse. So it turns out this consensus means we all share a hidden rulebook. Hoey argues that discourse isn't just a random pile of sentences stacked on top of one another. Actually, discourse is a machine, and the sentence is really just a single cog within it. We intuitively look for signals that tell us how one cog turns the next. So what exactly are these signals? The key here is that writers and speakers use a finite set of specific signals to glue sentences together. We use subordinators like because, conjuncts like therefore, and specific lexical signaling, deliberate word choices that cue you in that a new phase of the story is kicking off. And perhaps the most powerful tool of all is repetition. Sometimes it's the exact same word, sometimes it's disguised as a pronoun like it or they, but it acts as this remarkably strong hidden thread constantly pulling us forward through the text. Section 2. Decoding clause relations. To really understand this machine, we have to look at what Hoey calls clause relations. In plain English, this just means a sentence's grammar and meaning can't be fully understood in a vacuum. It relies entirely on the larger context of the sentences around it. The meaning of any given sentence is actively shaped by what came right before it and what comes right after it. Now, you might instinctively think sentences just stack up like bricks in a wall, each one connecting only to the brick right next to it. But our connections are actually way more complex than that. If it were just a brick wall, we'd only look for simple, immediate repetitions, like matching the phrase black ice in sentence 1 with black ice in sentence 2. But sentences reach across entire paragraphs. A phrase like the method described above might refer back to a concept introduced 5 sentences ago, skipping right over its immediate neighbors. Underneath the surface, our conversations are more like sprawling, chaotic spiderwebs holding everything together. Section 3. The problem-solution pattern. Hoey breaks down a minimum discourse into these 4 incredibly logical, interconnected steps. First, you establish a situation. Second, you introduce a problem that disrupts that situation. Third, you offer a response to that problem. And finally, you provide an evaluation. Did the response actually work? We use this pattern unconsciously every single day, for everything from mundane debates about where to grab lunch to high-level academic research. Let's see this in action with a short piece Hoey analyzed from the New Scientist magazine. The situation: helicopters drop freight. The problem: the impact of landing turns the freight over. The response: a newly developed platform with air-cushioned balloons. And the evaluation: tests show it can handle up to 8 tons safely without a parachute. Bam! It's a perfect, satisfying narrative arc contained in just a few sentences. Section 4. Matching and repetition. Let's slow down a sec and look at how repeating a constant actually sets up a frame to highlight a variable. The variable is the brand new information being introduced. By keeping the structure constant, like talking about a map being used by a person using the map, and then shifting the variable to architect's models being used by a person employing the architect, the writer is squarely focusing your attention on the differences and similarities between those two concepts. The repetition isn't redundant at all. It acts as a spotlight, gently guiding our focus right to what's changing. This matching relation lets us instantly parse whether a writer is highlighting compatibility or dramatic contrast. In the map example, using words like similarly shows compatibility. But then, listen to this contrast from a William Blake poem. Love seeketh not itself to please, versus love seeketh only self to please. The grammatical structure is repeated almost exactly, which makes the stark opposing contrast in the meaning of the words absolutely explode off the page. Finally, Section 5, the Discourse Network. Hoey concludes that discourse isn't just a straight line, and it's not strictly hierarchical either. It's a sprawling, interconnected network. A sentence in paragraph 1 might literally be secretly holding hands with a sentence in paragraph 10. The possibilities for relations are vast, but as readers, we navigate this web effortlessly. Just think about the sheer weight of that realization for a second. Millions of invisible connections firing in our minds in real time, every single time we communicate. Think of reading as this secret internal game of question and answer. Based on what you just read, your brain subconsciously forms an expectation. You're essentially asking a question, and the writer's next sentence serves as the answer. If the writer answers the question you were subconsciously asking, smooth sailing. But what happens when they fail to answer it? That sudden, jarring pause you feel when reading bad writing, that is you hitting a broken link in the network. Your comprehension stalls, and you desperately search the text for the right connection. Even right now, while listening to this explainer, your brain was anticipating my next slide, asking questions and looking for answers in this complex network of logic. So as you go about your day today, pay attention to the invisible architecture of your own conversations. Look for those problem-solution patterns, notice the hidden signals, and ask yourself, what hidden rules are guiding my discourse right now?